I am Dr. Mofokeng, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical mental health since August 2020. Special procedures of the Human Rights Council are independent human rights experts with a mandate to report and advise on human rights, and in my case, from a right to health perspective. For millions of people around the world, the full enjoyment of the right to highest attainable standard of physical and mental health remains a distant goal. And in many cases, this goal is becoming even harder to reach. My role as a mandate holder is to help advance human rights in ways both small and large. And some contemporary issues cut across a wide spectrum of human rights, showing the indivisibility and interconnectedness of human rights, especially the right to health. There are various ways of my interventions through legislative processes, improving access to mechanisms of redress, policy reform, human rights mainstreaming, contribution to governmental as well as judicial processes, human rights standard setting, and raising human rights awareness around the world, as well as facilitating dialogues, coalition setting, and preventing, and of course, communicating to states cessations of human rights violations. My mandate also includes reporting on the realization of the right to health throughout the world, including on laws, policies, good practices, and obstacles, as well as making recommendations to promote and protect this right and to support states' enhancement of public health. And in addition to my regular interaction with the United Nations Human Rights Council and the General Assembly, I also regularly engage and undertake joint activities with other parts of the UN system and agencies and other mandate holders throughout the world. I have personally endeavored to take dignity as the pivotal principle that permeates the right to health mandate under my tenure. I understand that people are not intrinsically vulnerable, but that there are vulnerabilities that are brought on by the obstacles they face in the social, economic, and political context in which they live in. I always envision to gain a deeper understanding on the negative impact of coloniality and racism and other oppressive structures that are embedded in the global health architecture. And as a result, my mandate as a special rapporteur on the right to physical and mental health has been to participate in judicial processes as a third-party intervener in court cases. And I will highlight just a few examples of those. MA and others versus France in the European Court of Human Rights. And in September 2023, I welcomed the decision by the European Court of Human Rights to hear an appeal against a French anti-prostitution law, warning the court that criminalization of sex work obstructed the right to health, particularly for sex workers. Another case is one of Mohadi Caster Semenya versus Switzerland in the European Court of Human Rights. This case concerned an international level athlete, Caster Semenya, who was specializing in middle distance races, who complained about certain regulations of the International Association of Athletics Federations requiring her to take hormone treatment to decrease her naturally occurring testosterone levels in order to compete in international competition. Having refused to undergo these various medical treatments, she was no longer therefore able to partake in international competitions in the female category. The European Court found that the applicant, Caster Semenya, had not been afforded sufficient institutional and procedural safeguards in Switzerland to allow her to have her complaints examined effectively, and that the domestic remedies available to the applicant could not be considered effective in the circumstances of the present case. The court held that there has been a violation of the prohibition of discrimination, taken together with the right to respect for private life, as well as a violation of the right to an effective remedy. This particular case continues to be evolving, and we are watching at the moment the processes as they unfold in the Grand Chamber. The next case is AG and TS versus State and others in the Malawi Constitutional Court. This case deals with the constitutionality of Section 138.1 of the Malawian Penal Code, which makes it an offense for anyone to engage in intercourse with a female child under the age of 16. Although this section was undoubtedly aimed to protect female children from sexual violence and rape, it casts the net too wide by including consensual intercourse between minor children. In this case, both minor children were under the age of 15 at the time of their arrest. They had both engaged in consensual intercourse with other female partners, also minors, at the time, and both faced a prison sentence of up to 14 years. And what is of interest is that only the boy child has been taken to court in this particular instance. The next case is Dobbs, State Health Officer of the Mississippi Department of Health and others versus the Jackson Women's Health Organization and others in the Supreme Court of the United States. The US Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to an abortion, reversing Roe v. Wade, the court's old decision that had guaranteed a woman's right to obtain an abortion. This court case ended the right to an abortion, unfortunately ending a 5-year-old decades right that had been affirmed by the court. It is important, therefore, just from these few examples of the judicial processes that my mandate has been participating in, that we must interrogate the law for its effectiveness, and remember always that, like medicine, the law can be a tool to protect or can be used to violate human rights. The law is not neutral. I am driven by the ideal of restoration of dignity and the identification of the contextual changes that are needed to remove the obstacles, oppressive systems, and conditions that make people vulnerable to right to health violations. And as the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, I see the law as integral to advancing health equity and ultimately in the creation of a world that is conducive to a life of dignity for all people.